Good morning. This morning's scripture reading is from Ephesians 2:19. For I through the law died unto the law, that I might live unto God.
Hello, everybody. I don't think there's any visitors out here that I am aware of that knows that I am not the normal preacher, and I have not done this in several years. So this is my first time in a few years of a preaching lesson, but we'll get through this. And so other than Baylor here sitting in the front, I think that everybody else realizes that. So today we're going to be talking about the fact that we're family. And I believe that this church and this congregation is designed to be a family. God didn't design congregations and the church as just a place that we attend. It's not just a random group of believers. I believe that He designed it to be a household, and a household is like a family, and it's an identity that shapes how we love, how we serve, and how we live together. All right, try this one more time. Okay, good. The batteries are almost dead in this remote, so we need to put new ones in at some point. So this is the theme. We don't just attend; we are family. You're going to see that kind of theme a few times throughout this sermon. And we do live in a place, I believe, that has a lot of connected people, but a lot of them are connected through social media, and they're trying to find their people, constantly trying to find their people. You know, at work, I find there's a lot of people who are very worldly who haven't found a spiritual family, and they're trying to find their people in other ways. And so while they have a lot of connections and a lot of people, they're I would say that they're very lonely and can be very lonely and can be alone. And the kind of this idea that if a person disappeared for a week, would anybody notice? That would be a question that I would have to ask myself. And so I want to make you a promise. If you stay engaged with me for the next 20 to 30 minutes, that when we are done here today, I want you looking at people in the seats around you, and I want you to look at them differently, not as just people who you attend church with, but as a family member, that you would notice if they disappeared for a week, and you would be concerned and care about that. We are going to go to Ephesians 2:19 first. The idea that the church is a household, Ephesians 2:19, and Hal, I'm not sure, because I'm gonna look it up again. I have it written in my notes, but I'm not sure exactly what scripture you read there. And I might have missed it because I have a lot on my mind right now in other ways. Or maybe it was the version that you had, but my version, which is the New American Standard Version, says, "So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with saints and are of the household of God," or of God's household. So here Paul's writing to the Gentiles who had no natural claim on God's promises. They were outsiders completely. And Paul said, not anymore. You've been brought into a household. And that word choice does matter, because Paul didn't say, hey, you're members of this institution, you're members of kind of this society. He said a household. And household is the type of language that we would use to describe where we live with our family, where, and being part of our family. If we turn to 1 Timothy 3:15, it reads, but in case I am delayed, I write so that you will know how one should act in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, the pillar and the support of truth. So notice how he called it the household of God. And there's a particular way that we're supposed to act in that. Households have rules. Some households that are run well have order, but the most important thing they have is a lot of love. Households that are run well have a lot of love in them. And with that love, we are connected to each other. We're connected to each other in a special way. If we look at Romans 12, 4 through 5. So let's turn to Romans 12, 4 through 5. One thing you'll notice is I don't have a lot of slides. I did that. I'm trying something new. I've noticed that David doesn't have a lot of different slides that he plows through. Just a few specific ones. And so we're trying something new here. Romans 12, 4 through 5 reads, "For just as we have many parts in one body, and all the body parts do have the same function, and all the body parts do not have the same function, so we, who are many, are one body in Christ and individually parts of another." So this is not a claim about the proximity that we have to each other. It's a claim about the connection we have with each other. We are like one body with different parts. We have different talents, but one thing that we can say is that when one person is joyful, we should feel joy. And when one person struggles, that affects us, right? When somebody's struggling, it affects us. And when they're absent, their absence is felt. And we should long, as a connected body, we should long to be spending time with each other and getting to know each other and being there for each other and serving each other. In 1 Timothy 5, verses 1 through 2, it reads, "Do not sharply rebuke an older man, but rather appeal to him as a father, and to the younger men as brothers, and to the older women as mothers, and to the younger women as sisters, in all purity." So we want to treat the people in this room as we would our own father or mother or brother or sister. If we're just a group of people who has the same beliefs, I might see you on Sunday but forget you by Tuesday. But if you're my brother or my sister, you're going to be on my mind all week long, right? When Ava's away at college, and Addison here in 2 weeks as well, I'll have 2 of them out of the 3 away at college. They are on my mind continually. I'm continually wondering how they are doing, concerned for their safety, hoping that they are having a good day, and looking forward to talking to them. Well, in particular Ava, but this will be Addie as well, the next time. Well, particularly Ava, because she's the one who's been gone for a couple of years, right? But soon Addie will be gone. And so, those are the things. But even when they're gone throughout the day at work, and I'm at work, I still have that same kind of need to connect with my family, and I want to grow that into that same type of need with everybody in this room. And how did we become part of God's family? Well, when we were baptized, we became part of God's family through adoption. And so some of you may know this. I have an older brother and a younger brother. My older brother was adopted, and he came home with my parents when he was just a few days old. So when I was born, I had an older brother, and even though we have different biological parents, I do not consider my older brother any different than I do my younger brother, who is a blood brother of mine. He's, we share the same biological parents, but my older brother and my younger brother are both equally brothers to me. Even though he's adopted. And I know that there's a lot of other people who are adopted, but it is something I found is a little bit more unique because while I know several people who are, most people are, don't have adopted children in the world. And so why am I saying this? In Romans 8, 14 through 17, if we look at Romans chapter 8, verses 14 through 17, it talks about us being these adopted sons and daughters. And so it reads, "For all who are being led by the Spirit of God, these sons and daughters of God, for you have not received a spirit of slavery leading to fear again, but you have received a spirit of adoption as sons and daughters, by which you cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with the Spirit that we are children of God, and if children, heirs also, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. So even though we are adopted into God's kingdom, and we don't necessarily share the same DNA with each other, we share everything else. So like my adopted brother has the same last name that my that myself and my younger brother have. He will be part of the inheritance when my mother dies, right? And that same thing happened to us. So we didn't earn our way in. We were adopted. We were given a name, given the inheritance, and given the right to call God our Father. If we read in 1 John 3:1, it reads, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." And so we've kind of established now that we're adopted, that this congregation or this church is like our family. And I want to talk a little bit about our spiritual family. So in Mark 3:33 through 35, Jesus is speaking inside a house in Capernaum with a crowd that sits around him. And it reads, "Answering them, he said, 'Who are my mother and my brothers?' And looking around at those who were sitting around him, he said, 'Here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, this is my brother and sister and mother.'" Now, at this time, Jesus' biological family was actually outside of this building asking to speak with him. And he wasn't saying, "Hey, my physical family, my biological family, doesn't matter." Clearly he doesn't teach that. He teaches to honor our parents, honor our families, but he's teaching something new. He's teaching that there's a spiritual family that is formed by our relationship with God. And that what makes us brothers and sisters is in our last name, it is in our ancestry, it is in our socioeconomic background, or our personality, or anything else. That we have a lot in common, but we have something better in common, and that's that we have the same Father, and we're seeking to do His will. And He didn't dismiss His physical family; instead, He enhanced it. And with our spiritual family, we have something deeper than just a shared background or shared interests or things like that friends have, right? So out in the world, we have friends that have shared backgrounds, shared interests. We have something deeper than that because it's based on our shared obedience to God, and the instructions we're given, and what Jesus teaches in us treating each other like family. I'm going to switch the slide. So this background is a photo I took of the camp that we were just at last week. This is Tall Timber Camp. I'm sure that some of the kids in here were wondering, is that Tall Timber? And that is Tall Timber. And those are the playing fields that we play on. That is a sunrise coming over the mountains, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we were sitting on that field, Joel and myself and Luann and Carrie's brother Tim and a couple others. We were setting up some type of activity in the morning. And I looked across this field, and right to the left of what you see in this photo is a bunch of cabins where the kids come from. And they were coming for breakfast. And I looked up and I see two of my daughters, Addison and Olivia, and I see Zoe, Emmy, and Julia, three of my nieces from Tim and Mary Spawn's side. And I see Micah and Talia, so another niece and nephew. And I was like, wow, like this is like half of my family right here coming across the way, right? But in addition to that was Vinny and Sophia Capelli were coming as well across. And I can't remember who I was talking to, somebody who didn't know us super well. And I was like, wow, that's all of my kids and nieces and nephews and stuff, right? And I said, except for a couple of them, which they're pretty much like my niece and nephew anyway, right? With Vinny and Sophia. And if the Mitchell's kids were there at that moment, we'd be including them in this same type of example. But it is like I do consider, I've grown up. The kids have grown up in here, and I've seen these kids grow up in this church many of them from the time they were born until now, and I consider them, very similar. I mean, they're not my kids, but they're very similar to having nieces and nephews. Very, very similar to that. And when I was mentioning this, we're going on a walk, and I was mentioning kind of this part of this sermon to Ava, who, we're going on walks together, trying to catch up with her since she's home for a couple weeks here. And she said, "Oh yeah, down at school. When I'm down at school, when I'm talking about people, like she'll go, 'Oh yeah,' I'll kind of refer to them as like kind of my aunt or uncle, people in the congregation, specifically Jason, your uncle Jason, who's a game warden, just in case you were wondering, to people down at Valley Church in Arizona. So I think there might be some confusion drawing here, but there is some threads of relationship, that go through marriage and stuff as well. But let's talk next about kind of a family who loves differently. So we've established a church is designed to be a family. Now let's talk about how a family loves differently. If we look at Colossians 3, verses 12 through 14, it's very much like the fruits of the Spirit. I've listed them up here. You're going to see these keywords specifically in verse 12 here as we start, and a little bit in 14. So as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience, bearing with one another and forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, you must also do so. In addition to all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. So why do we need these qualities? Well, because families are not perfect. And obviously the members of this congregation were not perfect either, right? And we need to really embrace, very similar to the fruits of the Spirit, we need to really embrace these attributes when we are with each other, and we're conversing with each other, and how we think about each other. In a family, if we have a conflict or we're frustrated, we can't just say, "You know what? I'm out. I'm done." Actually, Ava did try that when she was a little tiny one, and she was going to run away to the neighbor's, I think it was a playhouse in the backyard, and live there or something along those lines. But that didn't work out too successfully for her. So generally, though, we cannot do that. We can't just leave. And there are people in the world who do that. They kind of divorce their families and they leave. But realistically, that family is there. It's very important to us, and we are there to support, serve, and love each other. And I also don't want to see that happen within this congregation, that people feel like that they're not getting what they need and they want to leave. I want us to be a loving family in this congregation that that's not an easy thing to say I'm going to walk away from. If we look at Romans 12, 10 through 15, it says, "Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. Blessed be those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep." And I want to focus on this word devoted. So verse 10, be devoted, that particular word. That word's interesting because if you look at the Greek, it is the word philostrogos. Let's see here. And now I see I have the pronunciation. I've readjusted this phonetical spelling multiple times. Philostrogos. And that, in Strong's definition, I looked at the Strong's definition of that word, and it's cherishing one's so this word devoted, Greek word of it, cherishing one's kindred, especially parents or children, fond of natural relatives. And then it says, for example, fraternal towards fellow Christians, kindly affectioned. So in Romans 12:10, Paul is talking directly to the members of the church in Rome, which is a mixed congregation of Jews and Gentiles, right? They're not a naturally cohesive group. They often look down on each other. And Paul told them to have family affection with each other, to be devoted to each other. He's telling the people who naturally just liked each other that they are he commanded them to apply this idea of being devoted to each other. And this was not a command or some type of message to the spiritual elite. This was to the everyday Christian sitting there. And So this idea is really hard, and right, I was kind of thinking through my life, how many times, even within our family, right? Like you have this natural love for your kids and wife, but but there are certain times that I've had in my life where it gets really, really deep. Like your concern is so massive, it's almost overwhelming, right? And so this happened to me about 2 years ago when Luann was snowboarding and she broke her pelvis. We didn't know that she broke her pelvis at the time. She was up at Crystal Mountain, ended up breaking her pelvis up high on the mountain. We got her down. She had to be carried down in a toboggan by ski patrol. Ultimately, we went to the ER. We're sitting in the ER waiting. Finally, we get in after hours, get an X-ray, right, and it comes back that you've broken your pelvis in a couple spots. And I don't know anything about broken pelvises. I don't really know anybody who had a broken pelvis, and I'm thinking, kind of these old 80s movies where the person is in a full body cast for weeks in the hospital. And I'm thinking, this is going to be awful, right? And there was a young doctor there who was, I believe he was an intern. And he was like, so we had not talked to the orthopedic surgeon yet. They have not given advice. and, um, and so he's like, oh, it could be this or it could be that you might need surgery. And now I'm thinking, how do you rip open somebody and put in plates on a pelvis? I'm going through all this stuff and I'm thinking, I was so worried for Luann because I was thinking she loves to mountain bike. She loves to snowboard. She loves to wakeboard and hike and walk every single day. She's constantly moving. She loves to do all these things. And how much is this going to affect her life? And I was just I was completely just sick to my stomach, absolutely sick to my stomach over this. Now, it turns out that she had a stable fracture in which was load bearing. She could actually put weight on it. It hurt, but it was like as much as you can do, like pain allowing, you can walk on it. She didn't need any surgery. She didn't need any cast. And it took 9 months before the pain went away. But it did go away, and that was a huge relief. But until we actually talked to that orthopedic surgeon and we actually knew that that was the situation, I was thinking this is a life-changing event for my wife, and I was distraught over it, right? And so that's one example, and that's my wife. I get it. That's one example. But I can tell you, when we heard that Brian had tumors in his brain, I had, somewhat of a similar reaction. I was I was pretty bummed out for, I mean, not as much as Rachel, clearly, but pretty bummed out for, quite a while, and I still am. I'm really glad that he got operated on. He's doing well, right? But it's that constant reminder that we're family and that we do have um, we do have that connection with each other, that deep connection, and that we feel each other's pain. Um, let's move on to uh, John 13:33 through 35. John 13:34 through 35. Let's do that instead. It says, I'm giving you a commandment that you love one another just as I have loved you, that you also that you also love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. And so we are to do that. Now, as in a congregation, just like in a family, can there be frustration? Absolutely. Is everything all roses? Absolutely not. We can get frustrated with each other. We can get irritated. But we have to remind ourselves that we're here to serve each other and that we're Christian brethren. And uh, I can tell you that I don't think the world marvels at relationships where they look over and they see that Instagram relationship or whatever you want to call it, the one that looks perfect. And I don't think that they're super impressed by a relationship that looks perfect all the time because it looks easy, right? I think that people are more impressed and I am as well, when I see a news story about somebody whose spouse is in a coma and they're by them every single day for years, right? That's more impressive to me because that's where a lot of people would be like, and I've heard this as well. I've heard this in the news as well, where somebody has that prognosis and their spouse is divorcing them. And by the time if they wake up, let's say years later, I don't know if this is actually a story or not, but they wake up years later and they've been divorced. Their spouse has married somebody new, right? I mean, could you imagine, right? Versus, so when times are hard, but we can still persevere with love for each other. That is a much stronger message to not only ourselves, but also to the world, that we have a special bond that other people, and I think a lot of people in the world are looking for this type of special bond. They're looking for it in clubs. and other type of organizations, and they could have that right here, within the church. And what I want to move on to is the idea of this particular church and this particular congregation and the fact that we're small. So years ago, I used to, when I was talking to people like, where do you go to church? I'd say, I go to Renton Church Christ. We're a small church, we're about 80 or 90 people on a Sunday. And I try to explain kind of a little bit why. Not embarrassed by it, but just feeling like it needed context, right? But I wasn't necessarily proud of it, right? Because most people in their world view of Christian churches, they're thinking of the mega church that has hundreds of people, if not thousands, right? Maybe multiple services, 500 to 600 people per service. That's what they might have in their mind. And we have one service with less than 100 people, right? And I'm not saying that being big, a big church, or even a big Church of Christ church is wrong. The Church of Christ church that Ava goes to down in Arizona is probably 3 times or more the size of our attendance. But what I am saying is that we have a unique strength by being a small congregation. You are known and you're not lost in a crowd of people. You can't hide, and that's actually a blessing. You are needed, you're not optional, and you are missed when you are absent. So kind of going back to this idea, we don't just attend this congregation, that we are family. Let's look at a couple of scriptures really quick. 1 Corinthians 12, 25 through 27. 1 Corinthians 12, 25 through 27. So that there are no division in the body, but the parts that may have the same care for one another. And if one part of the body suffers, all parts suffer with it. If a part is honored, then all parts rejoice with it. Now you are Christ's body and individually parts of it. And also in Galatians 6:2, it reads, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. So Paul in Galatians does not say, hey, just be aware of one another's burdens. He actually uses the word bear. And if you look up kind of the definition of that word, it's that you're taking a personal responsibility for that. So there's a difference between knowing that somebody is struggling and helping them carry that struggle with them, right? Helping them where you can. And within a small congregation, we have an enormous opportunity to do this because we do notice when people are missing. We do care about each other, and we do want to help when others are struggling. We have really relationships with each other. We have real accountability to each other, and we have real care for each other. And that, I feel like, is more of a way to live out the New Testament church and the structure visibly. We don't have a big fancy building. We don't have a professional church staff like some churches have. But I believe what we do have is people who care for one another. I do want to look at a historical example of the early church in Acts 2:42 through 47. I think that this is kind of an important thing to give us some encouragement of what that early church looked like. Jason was talking this morning about the Restoration movement and kind of what time that we would target if we were to say we're targeting this as part of like the time in history that we're trying to restore to. And this is in Acts 22:42 through 47. And I want to really focus on verse 46. So when we get to 46, really pay attention there. Starting in verse 42, they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone kept feeling the sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all the believers were together and had all things in common, and they would sell their property and possessions and share them with all, to the extent that anyone had need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple, breaking the bread from house to house. They were taking meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord was adding to their number day by day those who were being saved. So notice where the fellowship happens. It happened in their homes. The early church wasn't a large crowd or some kind of large event. It was people living their lives with one another, sharing meals, devoted to teaching, praying together, sharing their possessions, spending time together with each other in homes, and caring for people who had needs. That's very much an example. And I feel like uh, sometimes people feel that in order to be a strong church, you need to grow your numbers and have a lot of people. But when you read Acts 2, it does read a little bit like something different, right? Like the early church wasn't simply how many people were there, but it was how deeply those people were connected and what they were doing. But here's the key for a small congregation like ours. We need workers in this congregation. And thankfully we have some. But to lighten the load, we can always use more. One thing that larger congregations have on us is with a lot of people, there's a lot of people that can maybe spread that burden and that load. With a smaller congregation, there are fewer of us, and so it becomes more of a struggle. And I want to give you some examples because we all know these examples here. But people who have been really stepping up to bear this load, and with David preaching two times a month, I can tell you how much stress, anguish, and work just this lesson went into. And I cannot imagine having to do it again this next week and then repeat over and over again every single month, 2 times a month, David preaching, and then Jason teaching classes continually. And there's others. There's Jared and Cameron who've led songs. Melanie and Joel have helped lead classes this summer, and that all takes preparation and work. And then there's people just like Andrea, who was walking up the stairs this morning with a big old box of the communion cups, and she keeps track of all that kind of stuff and helps inventory stuff downstairs. I mean, everybody has a role. But these are all examples, but what I want to point out is that we cannot be passive in a small congregation like this. We have got to be active workers and actively helping and serving. I'm proud of this congregation. Luann and I have been part of this congregation for over 21 years now, and we've raised 3 beautiful daughters, right alongside many of you in this assembly today. And we look forward to many, many more years of being together here with this church family. If you're inspired by some of the scriptures and some of these points today, here's some questions for you to consider. Oh, nope, not that. That is the last slide. I have big old slide markers, and I didn't have one there, but I thought I would hit it. Ask yourself these questions. Who could you check on this week? Is there anyone out there that I could offer assistance to? Who's hurting and needs encouragement? And there's some practical steps we can take. You can invite somebody to your home for a meal or just to visit and to catch up. You can stay after services. Don't rush out, but stay after services and visit. I know that's not always possible for everybody, and today there are some who are going to be rushing out. I know that for a fact today because one of them is my wife. But try to schedule in time to take that extra 30 minutes, 20 minutes after services to be here and connect and visit. You can grab this bulletin right here and look on the back of it at any week. Pick somebody and pray for them specifically. Pray for them as if they were your family and your brother and your sister. You can look for somebody who's alone and seems to be lonely. I can tell you that, since my dad died, that my mom is lonely and she needs, she needs people constantly, near constantly to be visiting with her, stopping by and seeing her, checking in on her. And so I know there's a need there for the widows of the congregation as well. We also have a couple specific things that are coming up. One of them is this coming Saturday, 6 days from now, is our church picnic up at Mud Mountain Dam. And I know that we have pretty decent attendance at the picnic, but it really is an opportunity for people to come together and socialize. We just had a social event at Lake Wilderness Park last Wednesday night. We're having this picnic on Saturday, this coming Saturday. And I really encourage folks who can make it to prioritize that time with our fellow brethren in this congregation over other activities. I know it's a beautiful summer day. That's kind of the point of having the picnic, though, is that we have it in summer. We also have our Wednesday night schedule starting in September. Our summer series is ending at the end of August, and starting in September, we're going to start a different Wednesday schedule for Wednesday evenings, and that's going to include the first Wednesday of every month is going to be a social event hosted in various places. That first one is at our house. Which is September 2nd at our house. And it's another great opportunity to come together, socialize with each other, consider it like a family gathering that we get together with each other. So once again, the idea is that we don't just attend this congregation, that we're family. And what makes this place special is not the size of our membership or how much better of a job that David does at preaching than I do. What makes it special is that we care for each other deeply. And I don't want us to sit there and be worried and focused on, growing this congregation, although that will happen naturally with time and it'll happen on its own. But instead, let's try to focus on having more meaningful connections and treating each other like family. And so if you need anything from this church, if you are in need in any way, this is your opportunity to come forward and kind of express that need. If you're interested in what it's like and how you become part of a family like this, we'd love to talk to you about being baptized and being adopted into God's family. And so come forward and make your needs known as we stand and sing the song.